good to see everybody. Thank you, Lila and Richard, for coming. I appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
One housekeeping note, we'll be asking audience to launch some questions at us towards the end of the session, and so please have some good ones ready for Lila and Richard. To start off with, since we're talking about AI's fantastic promise, what is the milestone, sort of the big sci-fi achievement that would make you say AI's promise is finally realized? That, wow, it's here. Richard.
I think AI and the definition of AI is actually continuously changing to what we are just not quite able to do yet. So as soon as we actually solve something, it's just a large language model that can write texts for you and an entire essay. We don't barely call that AI anymore. So I think we keep shifting the definition of AI, and we're going to keep doing that. And we see AI right now already writing proteins, generating photorealistic images based on a simple description, and so many more things that would have been impossible 5-10 years ago. And I think as we keep doing that, we'll keep pushing that definition of what AGI, or artificial general intelligence, might be.
Lila?
Yeah, thanks for having me here. It's good to be back in the United States. DeepMind is headquartered in London. And actually, our goal is to solving intelligence to advance science and benefit humanity. It's kind of an audacious goal, but quite exciting. So I think that's actually my answer to your question is, can we use artificial intelligence, artificial general intelligence, to understand the way the universe works? Can we better understand chemistry, biology, physics, and can we use that to solve world's problems and issues like life sciences, better understand disease, climate sustainability? And I think that ability to use a more generalized intelligence to augment human knowledge, to have some of these breakthroughs, is really going to be quite spectacular.
And Lila, how many years do you think it'll be to get to general intelligence?
It's anyone's guess right now.
Okay.
We're quite excited. I think the pace of advancements, I think as Richard mentioned, is speeding up. And so I think there's a lot of new approaches that are happening. The field is getting more active. So it's quite an exciting time right now, and and I'm sure we'll get into this, but it just means that we have to continue investing more in some of the responsibility and ensuring that we are actually solving problems and not creating more.
And Richard, you've had some sort of spicy things to say about what some companies are doing in AI. What's the beef?
Yeah, I think AI right now is in this kind of dual state. On the one hand, you have research towards AGI and continuously harder goals. On the other hand, AI is here. Right? It's changing all our lives as we speak. Every time we make a search, there are a lot of AI models. And unfortunately, right now, AI is often trying to just suck you into engagement loops online. And a lot of very smart people at various companies and other search engines and social networks mostly try to spend time on getting you to spend more time looking at content to eventually click on an advertisement. And I think that's not ideal. I think it's important that as AI influences us, we need to have some explicit control over it. So at you.com, a new search engine, we actually give you explicit control. And you say, oh, you want to see more Reddit results or less Twitter or vice versa. You can actually up and downvote the ranker and change the neural network that basically influences your information diet. And I think that's an important aspect of AI, that people that are influenced by it have some control over it.
Right. And Lila, what are your thoughts on that? AI for good versus AI for getting you to click on more ads?
Well, and that's really, so I have 30 years of experience in technology prior to DeepMind, and it was one of the reasons I chose to actually join this organization, was because I felt like the mission was really what I was looking for, of how to bring my experience in tech and really focus on the impact that AI can have. We're unique in the way that DeepMind works, in which we are very much a research-focused organization of kind of a bottoms-up and tops-down. And when we start new areas of research, we really think through what are the potential impacts, and from the beginning, design in a lot of the parameters that we want to consider around what might the risks be, where do we not have expertise that we want to bring in, and who are the partners that we might want to work with to help take some of the technology forward so that it does have the type of positive impact into society.
Right. And what do you think could be done to encourage AI for good? More of it. I mean, obviously, like I said, a lot of it now is being done to get you to click more on Facebook or on ads. Is there anything specific that can be done?
Well, I think a lot of this right now is about collaboration and awareness. So when the founders of DeepMind, we were comparing notes from 10 plus years ago when the company was founded. And at the time, they had a hard time getting investments. In fact, they were somewhat nervous to tell even their professors at the time what they were going to go do and start this company. At that time, I was actually in venture capital in Silicon Valley, and AI wasn't necessarily on our radar as something an area we wanted to invest in. And I mean, you just heard Richard rattle off a bunch of examples of how AI the terminology has advanced in people's understanding. Even my 12-year-old daughters, my twin daughters, they know, this is just all around them and how they interact with devices and what they're learning in schools, et cetera. So a lot has changed in the past decade. So I would say that awareness is increasing, which is an important part of it. But I think collaborations are key. May I give an example?
Oh, sure, go.
Okay, so one of the areas that we've been working on in DeepMind is we initially started off with an environment of simulated environments and gaming, just to try to develop new methodology around artificial intelligence systems, and instead of, so trying to innovate in that space. We then wanted to apply that more generally to real world problems. So we took on an area of protein folding. And protein, you say, what are proteins? They're basically the building block of life. And if you can predict a 3D structure of a protein, you can better understand its function. You can better understand disease, which comes with therapies. You can understand how to deal with industrial waste. There's all sorts of interesting opportunities. Now, biologists have been working for over 50 years to try to solve the protein folding prediction problem. With our advanced AI systems, we were able to work with biologists to make great advancements. About a year ago, we gifted to the world a database of millions of proteins and have been working with organizations. We're providing the model predictions, but we're not the ones to be able to take this. This really is a collaboration. And it's an opportunity to be equitable in access to the protein. So for example, we've been working with the neglected disease folks to help democratize some of the understanding of diseases in drug discovery, as an example. Or we're actually working with an enzyme innovation center that is working on plastic-eating enzymes. So we were able, within days, to provide 100 proteins where that they can start doing their research. So I think this type of collaboration, public-private collaboration, we're accelerating, we're leapfrogging areas of work that people have had bottlenecks in trying to make some of these advancements. Really good organizations, smart people, and this is a great example of where technology can help augment human understanding to benefit the world.
And
I think the protein space is really interesting. At Salesforce Research, actually, one of my last projects when I was chief scientist there was to build a large language model similar to the large language models that can now write texts. If you actually are not familiar with this, you can go to u.com/write and have a whole blog post written for you. But that same technology you can use to write English sentences, you can also use to write proteins. And so we actually then synthesized these proteins and generated completely new kinds of proteins in the wet lab that are antibacterial and have, I think, a lot of potential to change all of medicine. So it's one of those really interesting ones. To get to your earlier question, I think ethics is becoming more and more important, especially in that part of AI that really does influence our lives. And AI is essentially still just a tool, and it's only as good as the systems, the people, and the data that feed it and that work with it. And so I think it's extremely important that we make it more transparent and also collaborate.
Yeah. And Lila, how does DeepMind handle the problem or the challenge of ethics when it comes to AI?
Yeah, again, I'm fairly new to this field, so my experience in tech, and when I was looking at where to did I really want to spend this part of my career, like the prime of all this experience, and apply it into artificial intelligence? And there were a lot of organizations at the time, and honestly, the more I learned about artificial intelligence, the more uncertain I got. And I kept thinking about, this is the world my daughters are going to live in, and can I put them to bed at night and they know what mommy was working on? And so I actually, when I was interviewing at DeepMind, I spent about 50 hours interviewing just to make sure that, was this the field I wanted to go into? Was this the organization? And did I think I could have an impact? And I often describe it as almost like a moral calling of, yes, I felt like there was something to contribute here from my experience in bringing new technologies into market. And at DeepMind, what I've been really excited about is, from the very founding of the company, ethics and what we actually call it pioneering responsibly. They're two of our values, but it's one of our first principles. And we think about things in terms of responsible governance, like I mentioned earlier, having these multidisciplinary teams of people that talk about our work very early on, not bolted on. We bring in outside experts as needed. Responsible research, because we are a research-led organization. We've partnered with organizations like Women in Machine Learning, Deep Learning in Daba, which is an African effort to try to help the artificial intelligence, the computer scientists kind of come up to speed and the researchers on the latest trends, co-founded by some of our employees. And then we've also do a lot of work around socio-technical research, so areas of like queer fairness and decolonial AI. And then the final area, responsible governance, responsible research, and then responsible impact. And the example of AlphaFold, our AlphaFold system in collaboration with the outside world to try to understand what are the root node problems that we can deal and open up new fields of science, again, to try to benefit have broader societal impact.
Well, let's go to audience questions. If anyone has a question, please look out for one of our assistants who has a microphone and paddle. Anyone?
Hey, thanks so much. Love this panel. Matt McElwain with Madrona. Lila, I'm super interested in how what you've been doing with AlphaFold has been pushed by the competition from Rosetta Fold at the Institute of Protein Design in Seattle. And not only from a research perspective, but from an open source perspective, in terms of you all being more proactive about open sourcing after Rosetta Fold took that path.
So if I wasn't sure about your question, but maybe what I can do is, one of the things that I mentioned is we really think about the responsibility all the way through. And we wanted to make sure that whatever we were doing could go out into the world, and how could we ensure that it would be used for good and mitigate risks. Because we had spent the majority of DeepMind's history focused in simulated environments, and this was really one of the first broad-scaled impacts, we wanted to take a very thoughtful approach to how we did this. We're not a traditional organization in that sense, and I would actually say even being based in Europe versus being based in the US has some difference in how we approach this rolling out of the technology and the collaborations that we have. We're approaching 1 year since our AlphaFold system launched, and actually it's been quite exciting to see. I am generally, with my background in tech, I love seeing so much goodness happen. And I think that when more organizations participate, that it actually helps make us all better. The fact that we're having conversations about ethics and we're having conversations about ownership of your privacy, et cetera, I think these are really good things because that's going to help hold us all accountable.
I do love the push to open source more. It's kind of fascinating, but whenever someone has an incredible new capability, it usually only takes 3 to 12 months for someone else in another organization to replicate that capability and then usually open source it. So just today, actually, Hugging Face open sourced one of the largest language models. Full disclosure, it's one of my favorite investments. But they are now at the very forefront, and all the models, many from different organizations, are put out there on the Hugging Face hub to be able to be explored by everyone else. And now that people used to think you couldn't train these very large foundational models in an open way, but they showed that it is possible. So it's a very exciting time for AI to move forward quickly.
Okay, last question.
Hi, Jim Swanson from Johnson & Johnson. So very familiar with the protein folding. We're doing a lot of good work, I think, part of it with you guys. One of the things that we continue to watch for is biasness in the data, either unintended or intended. Can you talk a bit more about what you're doing to look at parity of data to make sure bias is not built in, and how you're assessing that over time, and what should everybody be looking for in that important space?
Go ahead, Richard.
Yeah,
And
boy, bias.
quick, please. We only have 45 seconds.
Yeah, boy, you could talk for an hour about bias. Bias, yeah, as you know, many of you here are familiar with, is kind of the problem of thinking you're training the model to, predict the beauty of a person, for instance, some silly classifiers that were trained, but the training data was just data samples from past beauty pageants that didn't have any woman of color in their data set, and so the classifier would not be able to possibly say a woman of color can be beautiful, which is terrible. And so this is just one of the many examples of biases. The same thing happens in giving out loans and restricting people in different areas of the world from getting loans, or just in the wrong zip code, because the classifier picked that kind of bias up from past biased samples and data in the world. And so it's a problem that has no silver bullet. You have to really look into each industry and very carefully understand who's affected by that classifier or that machine learning algorithm, and then do your best to try to mitigate and try to sample data from other areas, or just get rid of certain features entirely that might be relevant but would then result in a racist or sexist AI system.
Well, I want to thank both. We are out of time. I want to thank.
Find me and I'll give you my answer.
I want to thank both of you for talking about AI with us, and thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.